the students know me from the previous class, which was the marketing class. And now we will be talking about entrepreneurship, which I think is a very connected subject, extremely connected to marketing. Marketing plays a central role in entrepreneurship. And the students should be all very aware of the concept of, market research, looking for opportunities. So that's something that I spend a long time, and hopefully they've been inspired. I know there's a number of students that have voiced during the spring break that they're actually looking for more career and more work, more experiences within marketing, that they were inspired by the previous class, which I'm glad. That's kind of the purpose. At least everyone should see it's music and something, and maybe it's music and marketing now, their interest. And so in this class of entrepreneurship, music plays a big part because they have to come to invent, to create this startup business on a conceptual basis, versus before it was not conceptual because we had a client and we would try to serve that client, but we were stuck on what we could do with the client. And there was only certain realistic things that we could do. So this time the realism is the door for being realistic. It's sort of more open-ended in the sense that they can invent things that don't seem to exist. And I actually remember we have a student that now became a professor. His name is Seven. And I just think of him now because when he actually took this class, he came up with a business that had to do with immersive, metaverse, event, AI. And I think that was like in 2016 or something like that.
Yeah, he was in one of the first cohorts.
Yes,
So it was a long time ago.
I think he was in the fourth cohort.
That sounds right.
Or
Yeah.
fifth. And so I remember when he took this class, I said, okay, so you're going to do a startup that has to do with all of this technology. And yes, it's going to be concerts where you sort of there, not there. And there's going to be holograms and, and all of these things have sort of evolved in a different way. But it's this idea. I think he didn't realize this at the beginning, and then he realized that you want to be creating something, but you don't want to be too futuristic, because otherwise, when you make your presentation, which is in mid-May, then when they will be making a presentation, they will present as if they are presenting to investors. So they have to be sort of realistic to the investors and all that. So that's why I'm glad that you came today. Thank you for taking the time. The idea is for them to hear about the databases that's going to help them think about those resources to support the argument of what are the competitors, what are the trends, what are the opportunities, how much things are realistically can be expected and all that. So it's this foundation that I think is very important to bring here. And also this class goes very fast because they have to start producing something in 2 weeks, 2 weeks and a half for a first presentation and all that. But having done this for the 12th year, I know they can do it. And it's exciting to see the big change from where we were in January when I had them at the very beginning of the process. So this is exciting. So now we have almost not all the class, so people are sort of slow to come back to us, but because we don't want to go too far in the time, I would like you to get started. So I'm going to share the screen. I'm sure you have a number of things to show us, but before, how is everyone? Everyone is good? Okay, great. You all look refreshed. That's great. You look refreshed. Yeah, somewhat. Yeah. Comme ci, comme ça, we say in French. Okay, great. Wonderful. So here's to you, Lindsay Brown. Whenever you're ready to tell us what you think is the best shortcuts to get to those resources on those.
Okay, sounds good. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'll share my screen, but I'm going to put a guide in the chat. So a lot of times, as you know, I create a special guide for a class, and probably for most of the students, the last time they saw me was in the very first class, which would have been Music 580, a couple of years ago. And I have a guide for that, but I thought because there already is a guide for entrepreneurship, I thought I would just kind of build on that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but we're mostly going to be working from that guide. So this is this is a guide. You don't have to log in. It's just, freely available. And I'm just, if it seems like I'm looking elsewhere, it's because I have my notes on another screen here. So the first thing I would say is my goal in presenting this tonight is just to kind of remind you that this is really your opportunity to be really creative, but then also get a sense of what's already being done. So if you look at this guide, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here, some of these databases should seem familiar because we would have looked at most of them in 580, and maybe if I worked with students kind of one-on-one later in the program. So some of these should seem somewhat familiar. And then I've also added some things like, books on entrepreneurship. I don't know that you have much time to do, fun reading on stuff like this, but just to kind of make it available. So these are sort of the databases that I would encourage you to focus on. And obviously I don't really have time to go into everything. I think we will go into IBIS World because I want to remind everybody what a SWOT analysis looks like and how you could kind of get a sense of what's happening in the industry.
Just to give you some feedback, the statistics that I've seen them use in last class was Statista by far
great. Okay.
the most. The one that was the most mentioned about was Statista by far. Just so you know, that's the one that they somehow used. So I don't know. Here's the question, and I didn't have time to ask them. Did they use Statista? Because it's true, when you do a Google search, sometimes you have like a portion of a report from Statista, and you see some how do you call it, trailers or short of Statista, and that's what they use, and because it's very prominent? Or did they use Statista because they remember what you told them and they went to Statista to get the information? This I don't know, but I just wanted to mention that I've seen it. They mentioned it last time. But
good.
I don't know to what extent.
And I would think for a lot of projects it's probably going to work pretty well. So yeah, I'm thrilled if people are using it. I mean, we worked for a long time to get access to it because for the longest time we had a different statistical database that wasn't as easy to use. So just really quickly, I'm going to go into IBIS World, but again, would encourage everyone as you have time to kind of poke around these different collections. And my main reasoning for showing IBIS World is because I think it gives you kind of a nice overview of different industries and companies. And of course, these are big companies, and that's very different from a startup or, kind of the revolutionary type ideas that you're going to be developing. But it's still, I think, helpful to take a look at that. And just as an aside, Business Source Premier is also going to be really good. And you can also look at, company profiles, and you can look at SWOT analysis there too. But if we just go into IBIS World, and again, I feel like this is your last semester, you probably remember this, but you always want to start from the library homepage and you don't want to use Google to find a database, because then you could end up with a paywall, or you could end up identifying a report that we don't have access to. We have access to almost everything in IBIS World as an example, but it's at the same time, it's kind of limited to stuff in the United States. So I don't know, sometimes people still find a way to kind of come in the back and, find something that we don't have access to. So you can see this is industry and companies. So and this is super broad. And this is just coming from a place of I have no idea what, ideas people have. So if you just sort of start typing in music, you can see all of these different things. And I know that what you're probably thinking, what do I need? I already kind of know about musical groups and music publishing and things like that. But now you're kind of looking at it with a different lens. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that we wanted to look at independent label music production. And I think this could be really handy because it will show you, who are the big players. And I'm guessing if it's something like independent labels, it's probably only a few things, or like a few companies. And so you can see 94% of it, because it's independent. I just was sort of assuming there might be one or two companies, and then they have, kind of a fraction of what's happening. But you can see what it includes, and things like streaming, physical sales, on demand, digital album sales, things like that. But I would just encourage you to take a look at things like this. Like here, if you look at the industry structure, the innovation is low. So that to me indicates that there's an opportunity for you to come up with something that would intersect with independent label music production. And I don't know what that would look like. And oh my goodness, here's a cat that I just have to get out of the way. Sorry, he's very upset that he didn't get his dinner. So sorry about that. Okay. But here you have the SWOT analysis for specifically independent label music production. And what I would encourage you to focus on are the opportunities. So you have album sales, high performance drivers, high revenue growth, but you can also look at, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and just kind of see where's there room for you to develop something. And you can also look at things like this to me is interesting, the median age of population. If you compare that to the major label music production, that's seen as a negative. And I think the argument here is that perhaps younger people are listening to music that's on an independent label. So that's just something to think about. And you just have all of these different things that you can look at. And even though you're not, doing consulting per se, I always think that it's a good idea to look at these call preparation questions and just think about what are some things that you could think about, and things like illegal downloading, changes in technology. So you could look at this and think about, well, if people are continuing to download music illegally, what's something that I could develop or work on that might stem that and might help the artist while also, engaging with people who listen to music. So there's a lot of good information in here. And that's just one example. That's, independent label music production. You can also look at music publishing. You could, if you were interested in trying to kind of break through or, break into one of the bigger companies, you can look at those company benchmarking reports. But my purpose for showing you this was just to kind of remind you, IBIS is here and it has a lot of really good information. So again, it's not going to necessarily, you're not going to find your product here because you haven't developed it yet, but it might show you where is there room for you to kind of break in. So that's IBIS World. It's linked here. And, certainly you can look at other databases. We have, 300 databases. So just as a reminder, you can get to it from this guide or from the homepage. You can go to databases and you can choose what your subject is. I mean, maybe you want to actually look at music specific databases. So then you can choose that as a subject. Maybe you want to look at something in engineering. Maybe you do want to stick to business and econ. It's totally up to you, but we have them all organized in this way. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is, in addition to these databases, you have all of these different news resources. So, and you would have had the Wall Street Journal when you started the program, and I probably, pushed it pretty hard. And now that I'm looking at this, I realize I need to fix this link because this is not the one for WSJ.com, but we won't worry about that now. But there's just a number of different titles that you might find interesting, like MIT Sloan Management Review could be super helpful. Harvard Business Review, I think, is always a good thing to kind of browse. They do have some case studies in there. There might be something interesting there. And then if you wanted to look at something like the New York Times or the LA Times or even the Washington Post, that's all covered here in ProQuest Global Newsstream. So you can choose whichever one you're the most interested in, and then just kind of do different keywords, whether it's you're interested in a specific artist, or if you just want to get a sense of if your product already exists. And again, if it seems like I'm speaking in vague terms, it's because I don't know what your ideas are. Another thing I wanted to point out is we have these trade magazines that are, in my opinion, super important when you're, exploring entrepreneurship. So the first one is Entrepreneur, and we have that available. I think if I look at this, I think we have it, back maybe 20 or 30 years. And what I would recommend that you do with all of these, with Fast Company and with Inc. So it looks like, yeah, we have it from 2003. I don't know that you would want to go back too much further, but you can just choose, one of these links. So here we're going to go into Business Source Premier, and then it's taking you right into the actual magazine. So it looks like you're going into Business Source Premier, but it's actually just taking you straight into Entrepreneur Magazine. So we can look at the most recent issue, which is March, April. And just keep in mind, it's not necessarily going to be super focused on music. It's very broad. It's designed, they do a lot. They have a lot of content on franchising, just as an example. Like I would say once or twice a year, they kind of comment on, the biggest franchises in America, which could be kind of an interesting thing to look at if you're considering music. But I would just kind of recommend going through here and just seeing if there's anything interesting, if there's anything that you think could help what you're doing, even if it's just something like this article on, power of social media. And everything is going to be laid out exactly as it is in the regular magazines. So whatever you choose, if you click on the full text, it'll show you the exact layout of the magazine. So which is just kind of nice because some of our news and magazine content is just text-based. So just wanted to point that out. So we have Entrepreneur, Fast Company, Inc. You know, if you think some of those are going to be helpful, great. And then there's also information, depending on what you're working on, you know, patent searching and intellectual property. I don't know that I would worry too much about that at this phase, but you might find it kind of interesting just to go through, you know, an intellectual property guide or, you know, a Google patent guide, just to see if you have an idea for something, if it already exists. But my intention today is kind of to focus more on library resources. So kind of switching gears, something that I wanted to introduce you to, and I don't remember if we would have looked at this in an earlier class, I don't think so, is whenever I'm working with people who want to develop something, or even if they're doing consulting, I always encourage that they go to these two different databases. So the first one is ACM, which is, I think, Association for Computing Machinery. And then IEEE is an engineering group. I'm not sure that it matters what it stands for, but it's a collection of engineering resources. So I'm just going to start with ACM. And when I first started using this, I was a little bit intimidated because I don't really have a computer science background, but there's so much interesting stuff in here. And it's a combination of scholarly articles, trade articles, but what I think is really helpful, especially if you're looking to develop something, is it has these conference proceedings from a bunch of different meetings all over the world. So you can even start with something really broad. You can do music, or you can do music streaming. You can even just do music industry, which I know is a very, very broad search, but we're going to narrow it down because obviously we don't want, or maybe not obviously, but I wouldn't recommend, you know, going back as far as 1955. So I would maybe even just do the last 2 years and then just see what comes up. So you have, let's see, I don't remember how many resources we're going to get. Maybe we are going to get nothing. Okay. Oh no, here we go. We get 2,969 results. And you can see the first one already, I think, is kind of interesting. Because speaking of Seven, I just met with him a couple weeks ago because he was helping me with an article that I'm working on. And he's really into blockchain technology and digital rights management. So the first thing that comes up is there's a whole conference on blockchain technology and applications. And here it's talking about tracking and distributing royalties. Or another thing that could be kind of interesting, and I was thinking about this earlier today, is music industry professionals' perspective on music streaming services and recommendations. And the reason I've been thinking about this is I'm a Spotify user, and I can't believe how bad the recommendations are, especially for classical music. A couple of weeks ago, I was using it, and under the new music, you know, thing where it said new releases, it said that Mozart had a new release, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, obviously it was a recording of Mozart, but it's absurd to me that they were trying to act like Mozart's been really lazy for the last 200 years. And now he finally has, you know, a new streaming track on Spotify. And I feel like Spotify in particular, and even Pandora and other providers, just don't know what to do with classical music. But in any event, and then it just kind of goes on and on. You have things like algorithms in the music industry, again, more on music recommender systems. There's just a lot. And what you can do is you can continue to narrow down. I wouldn't suggest that you have to go through, you know, 2,000 results, but you can see if there's anything interesting, or if you know that maybe you want to focus on what's coming out of Georgia Tech or out of Carnegie Mellon, you know, totally up to you. Most of it is going to be full text. You can just click on the PDF or click where it says full text, and maybe something will kind of pique your interest. And again, I was at first I was intimidated by using something connected to computer science because I thought I wouldn't understand it. But the nice thing about these conference proceedings is there is some stuff that's a little bit technical, but for the most part, it's kind of, they don't expect you to be an expert in whatever they're presenting on. So it's you can usually understand at least a bit of it. So that's ACM. And again, that was just a really broad search. If there's something more specific that you want to look at, like music and AI, or if you wanted to, you know, go back to what Seven was thinking about those years ago, you could do you know, the immersive concerts, just anything that has to do with technology, which I think, you know, probably most of your ideas will have to do with that in some way. You might be able to find something here. And IEEE is similar and different. Like sometimes you will see crossovers if there's you know, if there's a co-sponsored conference, you might kind of see similar stuff, but you can do, you know, again, the same sort of search. I can just do music industry and limit it to the last couple of years. And so if we just, and this is also kind of interesting because, you know, before we limited the other one, it had, you know, tens of thousands of ones. This is actually going back to 1924 and somehow has, you know, fewer, but we can do the same thing. Maybe we can do, yeah, 2023. And you'll see some similarities. So again, with the blockchain technology, more on algorithms. And this is probably what made me think about how irritated I am with Spotify and Mozart is the talking about MIDI data with classical music. But again, yeah, more with blockchain, multi-track music generation, cloud computing, ethnic music data could be kind of interesting. And on the left here, you can go to publication topics and then you can click on what you're interested in. So you might, I would say if it were me, I probably would want to do music industry and then see if what in here is interesting. And if you see that there's a lot of something, like if there's a lot of neural network, maybe that's an area where it's already a little bit saturated. So maybe you want to go to something where there aren't as many, you know, there's not as many resources. So you would want to look at something like user preferences. And it's surprising to me that that artificial intelligence isn't as high, but it's okay. You can kind of do whatever you want, but you can just sort of see what's in here. And again, it's the AI is connected to blockchain, open music marketplace. Yeah, here's it's kind of hard to tell what this is about if they're just talking about synergy of AI and music, but I just think there's some interesting stuff in here. Like here, I would be curious to see what the chatbot would be for music data access. There's a lot of good things in here, and it's not so many that you couldn't go through them. I mean, if we limited it this way, I think we only have like 21 different articles to go through, and you can see again, it's kind of a mixture. It's mostly conference papers. It would be some proceedings here. This particular one is a journal article, but a lot of the stuff is not, it's not as heavy as it might seem. Okay, I'm just looking at my list here. Other possibilities, and these aren't necessarily linked from your guide, but you can certainly use OneSearch, which is our, our main library catalog. You could also use Google Scholar, and just quickly, I do want to just remind you, if you are going to use Google Scholar, you would want to make sure that it's connecting back to CSUN. So then we probably would have talked about this, but it's been a while. So when you go to Google Scholar, you want to go to the left here and go to settings and then go to library links. And then you want to make sure that CSUN is here. And the reason that matters is I'll show you in a second. So if you did something like, let's say music streaming and blockchain, just as an example, now when you go down the right here, you see where it says full text at CSUN. Whereas if you see something like this is actually in IEEE, so I'm not sure why it's not linking back. But what you want to avoid is something where it's just not available at all. Like here, this is another library that I have access to, so it's not showing up at CSUN. And I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but if for some reason this was something that looked interesting to you, then you could just use interlibrary alone, and I can help you with that when it comes down to it. But ideally, you would look for something where it says full text at CSUN or find it at CSUN, so that you're not going to potentially hit a paywall. And you can see a lot of stuff is coming up. And again, I'm happy to help you with that. It's just if you link it to CSUN, it's going to be a little bit easier to use. And kind of similarly, if you're going to use OneSearch, and we just go in here, I would always encourage you to use the advanced search. It's too tempting to put too many search terms in if you are just using it from the homepage. But I would use, advanced search and just try to narrow down. And on the other hand, if you're not finding what you need, that's when you can open it up to all CSU libraries, and then you would be able to borrow things from other libraries if you wanted to. So I know that that's.
And also they need to know that it's very quick, because sometimes students are from another library. I don't have the time, but I know that you said sometimes it's less than 24 hours. Most of the time it's less than 48 hours. So the student should not be too worried about, you know, using the all CSU and other libraries, because it's actually much faster than anyone think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The only time it would be difficult is if you are getting a physical item. And since this is now a fully online program, I know not everybody is even in LA or even in California. So for residential students, it's okay. They can, you know, borrow things physically from another library, but most of what you would need to get from another library is coming electronically. And yes, I borrowed, or, you know, I requested some things when I was working with MBA students. And I think the longest it took when I had to get something, one of the articles was only available at a New Zealand library. And I think at that point it took 48 hours for whatever reason. But I mean, most of the time when I request something, it's there really fast. And I can also just show you what that looks like. And I didn't do what I normally tell people to do, which is log in to OneSearch before you do anything, because then it's a little bit easier. But okay, I'm never clear if I have to do the multi-factor authentication, but anyway, so here I am. And I think I actually would still have some things in here. Let's see, yeah, so these are examples of articles that I requested when I was working with the consulting students. And just to show you how easy it is, I mean, here it doesn't give you the context of how quick it was, but essentially what happens is you get an email when something is available, and then you can just download it. And you don't have to, I mean, interlibrary loan or CSU Plus are kind of misnomers, because you don't have to return the PDF. And here, I don't know why this is cut off. I think because my text is a little bit big, but it stays in here for 90 days. So if you download it and then delete it for some reason, you can come back and grab it. But yeah, it's super easy. And just to show you what that would look like in case you've never gotten something from another CSU, just kind of do the same thing. Again, I'm not suggesting that you want to do the search, but just to show you what it looks like. If you have something, let's see, we're looking for articles. And of course, whenever I want to find something that we have, it's tricky. So this one is kind of funny because it says request item from other libraries, but we actually have it as an open access article. But let me just see if there's something I can find that we don't have. Oh, here we go. Okay. Yeah, so this is from the International Journal of Communication. And because I'm logged in, it will already show me what my options are. Yeah, so this, normally it says 24 hours. I'm not sure why this just says terms to be supplied. But if I wanted to request this, all I would have to do is click on get it, and then I'll get an email when it's available. And same thing, if I get rid of articles, I don't want to discourage you from using books, because although you're not able to borrow an ebook from another library, you can get a chapter digitized and emailed to you. So say, for the sake of argument, that you wanted something from the present and future of music law. We don't have it. And again, if you're not local, you don't want to wait for a physical copy, but you can have one book chapter digitized. So what you could do is look through here and say, I'd really like this chapter called, Sampling Practice, the Threat of Copyright Management to Its Future and Past. And so all I would do is say that I want the book chapter, and I would just need whatever information I have from the table of contents. And, you know, you don't really have to worry about the page number, because they can figure it out. But that is a really nice option. And truly, I've never known of anyone to have to wait more than 2 days to get a book chapter. And usually it's a day. So so that's everything that I had on my list, because I know we don't have a ton of time. Do I have time to take a couple of questions if people have them?
Of course. Yes, absolutely. So go ahead, either in the chat, or you can ask Lindsay, since we have her here.
Oh. Okay, I can probably stop sharing.
Yeah. What about the Statista? Did you want to show the students where Statista and all of this?
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful because,
Sure.
like I said, they seem to be using it, but
So yeah, it's just, yeah, it's linked here from the main entrepreneurship guide, and then
yes.
from the library homepage, if you go to databases, it's here under S, you know, so a few different options. And I think if you're on campus or if you're on the VPN, you probably could get there without having to, you know, log in via the library. But it's just, if you're working remotely and you were just to Google it, that's where it would be kind of problematic, and it might,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
and then it's too late to log in. It's
of
just,
course.
it's kind of tricky. But yeah, and what's nice about, oh great, okay, so I would actually have to clear my cookies. This happens to me all the time. But what I was going to say, and I can't prove it because of an issue with my computer, but Statista also now has an AI component, kind of like Mintel. So
Yeah.
I feel like it's pretty easy to search, but they also have kind of an inward facing AI where you, or, you know, like a chat GPT, where you can ask it a question and it's only searching Statista, which is kind of nice. So you don't have to worry about it, you know, finding phantom things or making things up. But I also think just the main search is pretty intuitive.
So does anyone know I'm just curious, does anyone know the price of downloading a Statista report? Like the minimum you would pay, does anyone know? So why am I saying this is because if you were to go to Statista and randomly spend 5 minutes downloading a report, I would say the cheapest report is probably $2,000 if you were to pay.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
So, which means that in 20 minutes, you could easily spend $20,000, but that would cost you this much. Once you're not a graduate or student, then you'll have to come up with $20,000. So my recommendation is try even once in your life, just for fun, to download $20,000 report and do it for this class, you know, because once it's done, it's gone. I'm lucky enough to work for a very large consulting firm where we can do these things, and I do it at the university. But I've also been in a situation where I didn't work with this big consulting firm, and the university could not afford those kind of databases because the budget was not there, or they were in negotiation. And then I really wish I could have seen the report. So it's kind of like, it's like if you never had caviar or foie gras or expensive strawberries, you never care for them. But once you have them, it's very hard to go back to the taste nothing strawberry and fake pate and all this. So I'm just saying, you may, since you don't know how much this, because these reports are not just expensive just because someone likes to make a lot of money. Is they're expensive because they have value inside and they're very recent. And so pretty much every 4 months, 5 months, sometimes less, those big companies, they produce those reports, and they only the rich and famous have access, or the business students have access. But it's my experience that most business students, I would say out of 100 business students, you're lucky if you have one that even know that they have free access to those databases. So I feel personally, and Lindsay knows about this, I feel kind of bad about, somewhat guilty, that you're just finding out, maybe just right now, that you have actually access to hundreds of thousands of dollars reports that are used by the biggest, most profitable consulting company in the world, and you're just figuring it out right now. So that doesn't mean that you should give up. This is the project, and it would be fun. I would be delighted to see when you present that you start showing in your reference list all of these reports, and I would love to count them and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 51, 52, and go, yes, they got their money worth. 52 times $2,000. That's a lot of money. Do it. Regale yourself. I don't know. I'm being obnoxious, sorry, but I'm just saying it's the truth. Take advantage. It's kind of fun because I'm telling you, once you can't download, then that's when you feel bad about it, not when you can and you don't because you forgot. So thank you, Lindsay. Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting us use all of this. This is recorded. This will be given to the students.